just like things would start growing in our yard that were like weeds, most people would think of as weeds. And I was just like so interested, like, what is this plant? What is that plant? And almost every single one was something that was used either for herbalism purposes or for food or both.
Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. Today, I am super excited to bring you this conversation with Colleen Codekas about a super popular springtime plant. For those of you who don't know Colleen, she's passionate about healthy living through natural food and herbal medicine. She lives with her family of 3 in Vermont, where living close to nature is easy and a way of life. In her off time, she likes to go foraging for wild edible and medicinal plants and mushrooms, cook delicious food, make mead, grow a ridiculous amount of edible and medicinal plants, and make herbal medicine. She is the author of the traditionally published book, Healing Herbal Infusions, and 4 ebooks, Wildcrafting Weeds, Healing Kitchen Herbs, Simple Mead Making, and the Backyard Forest Garden. She has also created an online foraging course, Gather Plus Root. Welcome to the podcast, Colleen.
Hi, thank you, Rosalee. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I feel like we've been, known each other online for so long, and it's really fun to have this, face-to-face visit, and I'm excited to talk about the plant you've chosen. But before we do that, I want to hear how the herb world called you in.
Well, let me see. So it really started with a love of hiking when I was a teenager and into like my early 20s. So I loved going hiking and just like being out in the natural world. When I was that young, I didn't really do any plant identification or whatever. I just liked being out in it. And then when I went to college, I was an environmental studies and biology major. And so I really started learning about botany and plant identification and identifying trees. And I really gravitated towards those type of courses. So I learned a lot about plant, just like identification. I wasn't as much into the like foraging and like herbal medicine part yet, but I just really loved learning a lot about plants. And then when I was in college, towards the end of my college years, I got a chance to go to Ecuador, which was really cool. I was there for about 4 weeks or so, and just learning about plants and the tropical plants was so cool. That was like 20 years ago now, so I can't really remember like specific plants that we learned, but we learned about a lot of different plants, and it just like really solidified me like wanting to like continue that like with my life. So then I got a job in my late 20s working in Yosemite National Park and was there for almost 10 years actually. And during that time, that's really when I started like identifying plants that were edible and medicinal. Like I really started like leaning towards that. I heard rumors about elderberry growing in the park and people making wine with it. We're in the middle of the woods, so like wine was a hot commodity, right? And so learning about elderberry wine, but like I had never like found it yet, so I wasn't sure what it looked like or anything like that, but I knew it existed right out there. So eventually I was able to find some blue elderberry growing in Yosemite and around and outside of the park and inside of the park, and I was able to identify it. And then, of course, I learned about the medicinal benefits that went along with elderberry. And so that was really cool. And then people would start coming to me, well, where are the elderberry trees? Where are the elderberry trees? And so it was actually pretty easy to find them because they were almost everywhere. And so that was fun. And then I started working up in the high country of Yosemite at Tuolumne Meadows, where it's really high elevation. And the elderberry doesn't grow quite that high up. It's more lower down. But I learned about yarrow. There was yarrow growing like everywhere. And it wouldn't flower up there through the whole summer season. It wouldn't grow flowers. It would just be like the frilly little leaves. But a friend of mine who I worked with sort of knew about the benefits of it and was, telling me how it was good for blood clotting and like all these things. And I was like, wow, that is like so cool. Like, how cool is that? So I would really say probably yarrow was the plant that like really got me into it. I mean, elderberry was an interest too, but I just thought this like, it was such a small little plant up at 9,000 feet, that this very unassuming little plant could like do so much. Right. So, um, and then from there, I eventually started my blog, and I just was pretty much self-taught at that point. I just started like reading and learning, getting books, Rosemary Gladstar, of course, and any books that I could get. And then I just sort of like learned by doing, creating herbal medicine, create in the very early years of my blog, creating things for the blog and learning as I go, learning how to make skincare products and herbal salves and creams and all that sort of thing. And just kind of like took off from that point, and eventually I took a couple online courses and stuff like that. And, then I wrote a book, and here I am.
Another thing that we share love for is beautiful photography. Is that something that you also just picked up along the way, self-taught?
Yes, yes, yeah. And if you were to look back at my first blog posts, the photography wasn't as beautiful, but yeah, thank you. I love photography, and that has definitely like been another like passion of mine as the years of blogging have gone on. And I love plants and photographing plants and photographing the things that I make with the plants, whether it's like foraged foods or like herbalism based stuff. It's really fun for me. I enjoy it. It's something that I really love doing. So
Oh, it shines through following you on Instagram, as well as your blogs, but like your Instagram page is just so beautiful. It's just eye
thank you.
candy for the herbalist. So,
Yeah, thank you so
I
much.
love that you said it didn't start off well, or didn't start off as pretty, because that's
Yeah,
the same way. Like my early photos now, I just cringe, but I just completely learned by doing. I was not something.
yes.
You just get a little bit better.
Yeah, first I was taking all my photos just with my phone, and now I have like a real camera. I actually just upgraded to an even better camera, so I'm really
Oh,
like
nice.
into that too. But the other thing I was going to say about learning about plants is where I was living previously in Southern Oregon. Now we've moved to Vermont, but in Southern Oregon, just like things would start growing in our yard that were like weeds, most people would think of as weeds. And I was just like so interested, like, what is this plant? What is that plant? And almost every single one was something that was used either for herbalism purposes or for food or both. So like chickweed, well, dandelion, of course, I was able to identify that one pretty easily, but like chickweed and like cleavers, we had this huge patch of cleavers pop up in our yard one year, and that's when I learned about cleavers. And wild violet, we had tons of wild violet, and I'm trying to think what else popped up. It's so many different things, henbit, so many different things popped up, and it was just another way for me to learn about plants, and sometimes it was like chickweed was one I had heard about for quite a few years, but the place I'd been living before, it didn't really grow very commonly or whatever. And then this plant like popped up at our new house, and I'm like, what is this plant? And then finally I saw the flower. I'm like, hey, I think that's chickweed. Wow, how
Mhm. So they really were popping up, piquing your curiosity. And it
yeah,
seems like that's a great segue into the plant you've chosen for today. And I'm so
yeah,
excited to talk about purple dead nettle because this plant is like the most popular plant for like 1 month out of the year. I
Right.
swear, everybody is talking about purple dead nettle. And the thing is, there's not a lot of information about it. So I think part of it is people are interested, and then people are also craving to hear from somebody who has experience with the plant. So I'm so glad you chose it. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say about purple dead nettle.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Purple dead nettle was another one of those ones that just sort of like popped up in my yard, in my backyard. The first year there was just a few of them, and then every year there was more until I had this huge patch, right? And I think that's just kind of how that plant grows. It's a mint family plant, so those tend to sort of like take over. And but yeah, I was so cool. It was so cool to like learn about it and what it was. I was able to identify it fairly quickly. And for those who don't know, like it has like a little purple top. It's kind of like low growing. It has a square stem. It's a mint family plant. It's a little bit fuzzy. It's called purple dead nettle because it has no sting, whereas stinging nettle has a sting. But it's actually not in the same family as stinging
Oh,
nettle
it's
at all.
such an unfortunate common name, one
I
that
know.
I think collectively we should maybe try to change just because, I mean,
Yeah.
one, it kind of like it just has a weird connotation, like purple dead nettle. But like you said, it's not in the same plant family. Once
Mhm.
you like know basic plant ID, they really don't look alike.
No.
So, and it's such a beautiful plant that I feel like, I don't know, it's just that relationship to that particular common name is not like heartfelt really for me. So, yeah, it'd be nice. It's fun to call it Lamium purpurea because that, is that's also, letting us know about, being in the mint family and the color of it, purpurea, but doesn't
Yes.
quite roll off the tongue in a common name sort of way. So,
Right.
we should like have a contest, like let's rename this. Let's all commit to using this new common name.
Yeah, yeah. I remember thinking when I first identified it, like, well, it doesn't have a sting. Like, why are they calling it dead? I guess that's where they get the dead nettle part, but why the nettle part? Like, I don't quite understand it. I saw a few things online that said, well, because the leaves look similar, and I'm like, but I mean, they do, I guess, but not really that much. So they're much smaller. Purple dead nettle leaves are much smaller, and they're fuzzy, so maybe that's why. But whenever I post about it on my Instagram or wherever, people a lot of times think, oh well, it's a nettle, does it must sting. Like there's one picture that I have of me holding up like a whole bunch of purple dead nettle, and they're like, you're holding it with your hands. And I'm like, well, yeah, it doesn't have a sting though. So um yeah, it's a really cool plant though, and some people despise it, just like other plants that are viewed as weeds because like I said, it can take over. I just let it do its thing, and when it grows in my yard, and just kind of let it take over. Like you said, it doesn't last for very long. It's sort of, at least where I was in Southern Oregon, it would come up around the same time as chickweed and wild violet. So actually, the chickweed and wild violet might have been like a tiny bit ahead of, and then not long after that, purple dead nettle would pop up, and it would seem to just grow very, very quickly, and then it would be there for a few weeks, and then it would kind of like go to seed and get kind of like crusty-ish, I guess is the right word, but it would get kind of pokey, and then die off, and that would be the end of purple dead nettle. But people always get excited when I post about it. So
I rarely see purple dead nettle without a bee or several bees buzzing around the
yeah,
plant.
the bees tend to love it a lot. I've seen bees a little bit on the chickweed flowers, and of course you'll see them on dandelions, but they kind of swarm to the purple dead nettle for sure, um, which is pretty cool. So
Mhm.
it's definitely like a good early spring plant for the bees, just like dandelions are. So if you have a purple dead nettle in your yard and you don't want it there, it's good to leave some.
Yeah, yeah. And so you had purple dead nettle peak up and more, and then I'm sure it grabbed your attention, and then you started making things with this plant?
Yeah, yeah. So I just, after I realized that it was like edible and medicinal, and I'm always like, woohoo, when I find a plant that's like that, right? I just started like researching on what I could do with it. The thing about purple dead nettle is that it doesn't taste super great. It kind of has a musty flavor. Some people like it, some people don't as much. It's just kind of grassy. Musty is the word that I hear people use
Mm.
a lot. So if you're going to use it in like making a pesto or something like that, I usually recommend people to mix it with other herbs. Like it's really good mixed with chickweed and dandelion leaf. That way you sort of get the benefits of all of them, but you don't have the like sort of weirdish flavor of purple dead nettle. It's also kind of hairy, like I mentioned, so um, it just having a lot of it is just not doesn't have like the best taste in your mouth kind of. So you can use it as an herb, like little bits here and there, like you would just use a chopped herb. But of course it has these medicinal uses. So there's ways that you can use it medicinally. Some people make a tea out of it. Again, it doesn't taste super great, so you can put honey in it or whatever. And also I should mention that it's really good for allergies, purple dead nettle, same as stinging nettle. So it sort of has the same benefits in that manner. People tend to use it for allergies, and it's also a good anti-inflammatory and antibacterial. So I've actually never made it into an infused oil and salve, but I know that it is really beneficial for that. But yeah, there's lots lots of great ways to use it.
So is there something that every year you're sure to make with purple dead nettle?
Typically I'll include it in a wild greens pesto. So that's why I mentioned that recipe. And I've seen recipes that call for all purple dead nettle, but I don't think that would be something that most people would like. So I really like the bitterness of dandelion root, and I think that, I mean, of dandelion leaf. So I think that sort of complements it well. And then if you happen to have chickweed around, you can add that too. And I think those three together work really well. Um, that's like the main thing that I do. So with purple dead nettle, I also like to infuse it into honey, and that's sort of a new thing that I did last spring, and I'll do it again this spring. But the benefit of that is it kind of the honey kind of gets rid of the the taste that people don't like so much, and
Hmm.
so you can enjoy the benefits of purple dead nettle with the honey, which um, kind of tempers that flavor.
And do you, with that honey, is it something that you like adding it to teas, or is there, particular ways you like to work with the honey? Like I'm imagining that maybe it could help with allergies. You mentioned
Yes,
allergies. Yeah.
yes, it can definitely help with allergies, and especially if you use local honey, because it's, sort of known that if you use a honey that's really, really hyper local to your environment, that may help with allergies as well. So then you kind of got like a double dose there. But yeah, you can use it in with your tea, or you could just take a spoonful of it every day. Some people like to do that, just like have their purple dead nettle honey or whatever type of honey they're making. But yeah, those would be the two main options. Or you could just drizzle it on your oatmeal or on your ice cream or whatever you want to use it for. But honey is just delicious. And when you use the fresh plant material too, and that's another thing about purple dead nettle and a lot of plants. I mean, you could use purple dead nettle dried, but I think it's more beneficial to use it when fresh. If you've ever dried like a mint family plant, like a lot of times they sort of lose their scent a little bit and lose their, I'm trying to think of one that I've done. Like peppermint will still be really strong smelling, but some of the other mint family plants, they just seem to sort of like lose some of their like essence or whatever. So I feel like with the honey, it's really easy to just throw a whole bunch of purple dentil in a jar, top it with honey until it's covered, and just let it infuse for a few weeks. And super simple, really easy, and pretty tasty.
Those are my favorite kind of recipes.
I
So
know, me too.
thank you so much for sharing that recipe with us. And for the listeners, if you'd like to download your free recipe card, then you can visit the show notes at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com, and you'll get a recipe card for purple dead nettle infused honey. Well, I'm wondering if you could talk briefly about lookalikes, because I feel like there's some that often comes up when people are thinking about purple dead nettle and some of the lookalikes that are out there.
Yeah, sure. Um, well, we already talked about stinging nettle, which really does
Right.
look like purple dead nettle, even though they have the same name. The main lookalike would be henbit, which is very, very closely related to purple dead nettle. And to be honest, they could be used in the same way. So it has a square stem. It's about the same height. It has the little purple flowers. It doesn't have like the purple dead nettle, like the top is like triangular shaped, and that whole top is sort of pinkish or purplish in color. Henbit, the leaves sort of go around the stem, and it does have little pink flowers, and the pink flowers look almost identical to the flowers that actually come out of purple dead nettle. And both of those look very similar to other mint family flowers as well. They're just really tiny, and they have this sort of distinct look to them. But the leaf structure is different, and they're not they don't have the furry hairs. But sometimes people call purple dead nettle henbit dead nettle, which is really confusing
That's very confusing.
because they're two different plants. But both of them are edible, both of them are medicinal. So even if you confuse them, it's really no big deal.
Well, thanks for mentioning that. And
Yeah.
do you have anything else to share about purple dead nettle?
Well, one thing I can say is I do have a whole blog post on my webpage about purple dead nettle, and I have photos that show the difference between dead nettle and henbit. So if you really want to get like a good photo representation of those, you can check out on my blog, Grow, Forage, Cook, Ferment, the post that I have all about purple dead nettle.
And it is another example of your stunning photography on that particular blog post as well. Well, Colleen, I'd like to hear about what projects you have going on right now.
The main thing is my online foraging course. So it's called Gather and Root, and it's open all the time for enrollment, but it's obviously very popular during the springtime when everybody's starting to think about foraging and all that. And I talk about edible plants, I talk about medicinal plants. So I kind of cover both bases there, but it's all about foraging, and it has like 50 to 60, I don't know the exact number, but somewhere between 50 and 60 plants I cover. I do videos for each one and show how to identify them and use them and harvest them and all those sorts of things.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
If you'd like more information on purple dead nettle, visit the video description for a link for an exclusive handout filled with lots of tips and insights. My last question that I have for you is one that I'm asking everybody in season 3. And I
Yeah.
love this question because it's, no matter whether we've been herbalists for 30 days or 30 years, there's always something new out there in the herb world. So I'm curious, what's new for you these days?
Well, what's new for me is us moving to Vermont, as I mentioned. So I had been a West Coast person my whole life, and so that's where I learned how to identify plants for it. I learned all the plants on the West Coast for foraging and the herbalism plants. So I'm all really knowledgeable on the West Coast, but there's some differences. And what's really exciting to me now is to see all the things that are growing out here. So when we moved, it was in the middle of summertime, and there was all these plants, some of which I recognized, of course, but some of which I didn't, and others which I was really excited to find. So as we were traveling through upstate New York to get to Vermont, I saw these flowers just like growing all along the side of the road. And at one point I asked my husband, I was like, we need to stop. I need to like see if that flower is what I think it is. And I was right. It was wild valerian growing
Mm,
everywhere, which I had grown in my garden in the past, but never really had found in the wild in Oregon. So
mm.
I was like so excited. Um, and teaching my son, who was 4, that this is wild valerian. And it's really exciting to me to find these plants that, okay, I know about and I've heard about and I've used and I've maybe even grown, but like haven't like found them out in the wild. So yeah, valerian was one. And then the eastern version of mugwort, of course, on the West Coast, we have the West Coast version, but to see the eastern version was really exciting. And staghorn sumac grows
Mm.
everywhere here, and of course black elderberry too. We have blue elderberry on the West Coast, and there might be some places where you can find black elderberry. Have you ever found black elderberry? Yeah, it doesn't.
Not growing wild, but
Yeah, we
people.
actually had one growing in our yard that we planted, but yeah, I had never seen one in the wild. But as we were traveling, up the East Coast, we saw black elderberry just like growing on the side of the road. So that was very exciting. So anyways, I'm excited for the upcoming spring and summer to see what else I'm going to discover that maybe I haven't, discovered enough of. Jewelweed was another one. Jewelweed was.
I'll bet. Yeah. Yeah, I had that same experience in that I learned all of the plants on the West Coast and then I moved across the mountains. And that time was so special that just every
Yeah,
day just felt like so exciting and vibrant. And I never
yeah,
went anywhere without my field guides. And it's just, it's those beginning crushes and the intensity.
right,
And
right.
yeah,
Even just the trees and stuff, there's different trees and, some of them are similar, but just learning like what's here, like what's new um, and all that. It is very exciting.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, Colleen, for being on the show and for sharing about purple dead nettle with us. It's been such a pleasure. And I'm just so happy that you've been here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the link in the video description to get free access to Colleen's recipe for purple dead nettle infused honey. You'll also get access to the complete show notes, including the transcript. If you enjoyed this interview, then before you go, be sure to click the subscribe button so that you'll be the first to get my new videos, including interviews like this. I'd also love to hear your comments about this interview and this lovely springtime plant. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists, gardeners, and plant-centered folks like you. I'm so glad that you're here and a part of this herbal community. Have a beautiful day.